I'm Mark Musey, talking with my friend Manoj Jain about meditation. Today we are discussing the categorization of meditation. And in your presentation, Manoj, you noted that we can talk about three different types of meditation. And one of the first things that I wonder is why it is that we find it necessary to categorize meditation.
So, as scientists, when we begin to study something, we like to lump it into particular groups, especially a practice such as meditation, where there are thousands of types of meditation. And what we've begun to do is to look at the core of each one of the meditation practices. And when we look at those practices, what we find is that they can be put into three buckets or three categories. And when we look at brain waves, or we look at how one practices them, or even the impact it has on our body, we can put them as a focused attention meditation, or anchoring meditation, or as an open monitoring, or surveying meditation, or self-transcendence, or relinquishing our thoughts meditation.
So, do you think that all different kinds of meditations, and we talked in an earlier conversation about how there's Vipassana meditation and guided meditation and Zen meditation, do you think all these different types will fit in one or the other of these categories?
Absolutely, they do. For example, Vipassana and Zen meditation, they fit into the open monitoring, the surveying type meditation. Now, there are elements of which that one is going from the focused attention, the breath meditation, and some going to self-transcendence, which is the transcendental meditation type. So it can vary, but generally they are in those various categories.
Yeah, because I got the impression from your presentation that not only do these categories define specific techniques within meditation, so that there's a particular kind of meditation that we might describe as open monitoring or focused attention, but even within a particular form of meditation, that all three of those categories might apply. So that I might be practicing something like Vipassana meditation, and yet even within that, let's say, 20-minute meditation session, I'm experiencing open monitoring and then focused attention and maybe even self-transcendence. Is that right?
Absolutely. So in a 10-minute session, you could be doing all three of those types of meditation. So we're not asking individuals to do only one type, which is focused attention or a open monitoring type. Do the meditation that you're doing, which is perfectly fine. But be aware that these three categories are there, that your brain waves alter when you're doing these types of meditations.
So it sounds as if one of the reasons that you're seeking to categorize them is to kind of give meditation practitioners across different traditions a common vocabulary to talk about experiences that may be similar to one another.
Sure. If you have uniformity of technique, uniformity of practice, then we can talk about the uniformity of experience. What type of an experience are we gaining? As well as if there are biological changes, we can talk about those and study them. We are at the infancy in our study of meditation and mindfulness. Over the next 10 to 20 years, this is going to explode in ways of, scientifically, looking at how mindfulness and meditation impacts the body.
I can see the value of using these categories or types in scientific study, because science does this all the time. It tries to reduce a very complex world to simple categories, and it makes it easier for us to think about it. So from a scientific or medical point of view, this makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
But what does the ordinary practitioner gain by categorizing meditation in this way?
Well, it's first helpful for learning. It's helpful for learning and teaching. Those of us who may not have heard of meditation or mindfulness and want to put it into a place where they have other practices, that someone may be doing contemplative prayer, or someone may be doing Vipassana meditation, but they haven't learned Zen meditation. It helps them understand how this fits in with the others. So for learning and for studying and even for teaching, this provides a structure. and that's helpful.
Well, that helps me with an insight too, because as a teacher, one of the things that I'm always trying to do whenever I want to teach students something that is strange to them is to compare it to something that's familiar.
Exactly.
And what you're saying is that by comparing a meditation practice or even a practice that you might not even call meditation, it might be prayer or contemplation or just sitting quietly, you can compare it to something that might seem a little odd, a little strange, and yet by making that comparison, a person knows, hey, this is not so different from what I do or from what I know.
Sure, and then what we can do is we can extract core elements from these various practices and find out what are the core elements that are working or not working for particular meditations. And then we can expand and explore and even initiate patients to use certain practices. Just to give you an example, what we find is that when patients do what we call open monitoring meditation, mindfulness or surveying meditation, they are able to reduce their anxiety. They're able to reduce depression and even pain. Those studies are pretty compelling that show that that type of meditation is helpful. And so what we would do is to encourage and teach patients and individuals that type of meditation. So that's where categorization can be very helpful and useful.
I think our viewers would also like to know whether or not the kinds of categories that we use to describe these different forms of meditation has a basis in, say, the other forms of scientific literature or what others have said about meditation in their studies. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. So we have worked and talked about these three categories. Other researchers have started to do similar work, and even before us, a number of articles have come out which have taken meditation and divided them into focused attention, open monitoring. What we have done is to look at the literature comprehensively and said what would work for us to be able to teach and explain. And we've shared this model with a number of individuals, and it really does make a lot of sense in putting meditation into these three categories. This may change over time. We know that categorization changes, but that's okay. But for today's day and age and time, this works really well in being able to categorize meditation and then to advance this in our day-to-day practice.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because it sort of reminds us that science is a constantly changing enterprise, and so is spirituality. Even though it's an ancient practice, we're constantly rethinking what it is that we have thought. And so to say that we're using these categories because they make a lot of sense today doesn't mean that they're written in stone, and that new evidence and new studies may suggest that perhaps 4 categories or 5 categories may be a better way of thinking about this. Maybe we'll even get to a point where we want to use no categories at all. But we're always open to that idea that there are different ways of constructing what is a very fluid phenomenon.
And the categories also work well with the model. The mindfulness model is, again, something that helps us to construct our thinking about distractedness or mindlessness or restlessness and happiness. And where does meditation and mindfulness fit in? And where do each one of these meditations fit in as well? So if I'm doing Vipassana meditation, I can see where my type of practice fits in. If I'm doing Zen meditation, I can see where it's fitting in and how it relates to compassion, how it relates to bringing me happiness, and how it relates to distracted life that I may be living.
Wonderful. I know we've got a lot more to say about the categories of meditation. I know you're going to explain in your presentation each one of the categories that we use. And so we'll be returning a little bit later on to continue this conversation and to talk about those different forms of meditation. So we look forward to seeing you then.